Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. I just thought I'd start you off today by saying I'm having a pretty darn good day. I did not take the day off to go hunting. These were actually in my front yard, so I've got them getting ready right now. We're going to get them cooked up here as soon as I'm done forecasting this, putting together this forecast. So I hope the rest of you, if you like to hunt, are having a good go of it here. But we got to talk about some other things, and the first thing is this. I'm still working on this. I'm trying to find a better way to kind of convey this information, but of course we've had an extremely windy spring. And when we look month by month, of course, I'm still waiting on all the data from April, but March, of course, and so was February and January were very, very windy throughout the midsection of the United States and other places as well. And I got to ask a great question. One of the questions was, does a really windy spring correlate with a very dry summer? That's a great question. And preliminarily, just looking at some of the data and kind of anecdotally going through it, I don't see a correlation. I think there are other things that tend to really control that, and primarily it's not the winds over the U.S., it's the winds actually in the tropics. I'll talk more about that in a few seconds here. I'm going to work on the answer to that question, though, because it was a good one. And then I got to ask another question, and it was about what was going on in the Dakotas. So we know we've talked a lot about how since really the equinox, but much of April, which is what you're looking at here, has been very cold across the north interior of the U.S. And we've discussed why this is. The mean position of the jet stream coming out of the Pacific Northwest and diving in here has produced many systems, quite a bit of cloud cover, some very cold weather. It's done some damage, of course, to the tree fruit industry and vineyards in the Northwest, and we've been extremely cold across the northern tier of the United States without much of a break. We have had breaks across this region, but those breaks have been quite brief and then punctuated with heavy rainfall, which is another thing we're going to discuss about the delays here. Also, we still do have quite a bit of snowpack here in this part of the northern plains in parts of North Dakota. So a lot of this is melted. Some places here had over 3 feet of snow out of the last 2 systems, and we still have quite a bit more water there, so things are kind of soggy. I was looking today at some satellite imagery just to see the snow right here under the clouds, and you can see it with me as I kind of hover over that. But also notice we were starting to pop, so the convection was starting to go here in parts of the plains, just a few places beginning to pop with some bigger storms, and so we do have more severe weather to talk about. But the question was, has spring been trending cooler in the northern plains? That's a great question. So I went to one of my favorite tools. It's called Climate at a Glance. It's from NOAA, and I grabbed the average temperature for the 2 months of March and April, went back to 1895 for North Dakota, and plotted it. Now, you can see there's a lot of variability in this data set. And of course, the Northern Plains is one of those places where, depending on the weather patterns, the spring temperatures can range on average 10 to 15 degrees year to year. See, that's the variability here. But to answer that question, I just detrended the data set from 1980. So over the last 42 years, the answer is yes, it has actually been cooling. How much? At a rate since 1980, about 0.4 degrees Fahrenheit per decade. So it's significant. It all depends on when you start your trending, but over the last 40 years, the answer is we've been favoring cooler at times springs in North Dakota. So a great tool just to check out here, Climate at a Glance. I just thought I'd answer that question because it was a good one that was posed to me. Now from here, what I want to be talking about, I think, is maybe some of the more longer term things that are related to that. And I just want to bring this up. We talked about it in January, but it's worth seeing again. When we got the new climate normals, which were updated this year, they're updated at the beginning of every decade, we discussed how when you got rid of the 80s and put in there the 20 teens, that we saw temperature change in the northern plains annually was not very strong. It was basically non-existent, whereas much of the rest of the country had seen a warmer trend over that time period. We also discussed when looking at these where we were primarily wetter east of the Rocky Mountains for the most part, but drier in the Great Basin and in the west. So again, I just wanted to reiterate these long-term climate normals as they've been updated here. Now, this particular year, our major stress has been the lack of precipitation since the beginning of the year across the west and here in the plains, and then too much of it across much of the east and the south, and then lately here with those big snows that have come into parts of the northern plains and all the flooding going on in the Red River Valley of the North. So here's what we need to see. In the last month, there's been major improvement here, right? Northern California and Oregon. We're watching in the near-term forecast for there to be improvement here and possibly east of that line. We've seen a shift overall in the net position of the jet stream, and there is some help with some blocking high pressure that's kind of sitting in this area, slowing a few systems down and returning better moisture to the east of that line. All right. Now, thinking about that, I just want to show you something. Looking at some of the infrared satellite data from yesterday, look right down here. Large storms, big convective cells last night, just popping down here in the panhandles. We also saw some heavier precipitation coming through parts of Iowa. And you just look back over the last 24 hours. In fact, let's just get a quick update on this. There we go. You can see that in the last 24 hours, there's been some heavier rain here, also in and around, Kansas City and south, really south of Kansas City through Missouri. But there are some places in through here, especially in the panhandles, that had not measured rain since last October, that just saw in some locations up to 2.5 inches of rain, maybe some places more than that. Well, it's a Thursday, and we know that we get the new drought monitor data today. But I'm going to link for you in the section below this website. I want you to check it out. It's from NIDIS, okay? So this is the National Integrated Drought Information System. And I want you to interact with this site because you can look at the current drought monitor, which goes back to the year 2000 with weekly data. You can go back to 1895 with the monthly data, and they actually have a thing that goes back to the year 0 to 2017. It's kind of a neat thing. What I like about it, though, is that you can come in here and you can put in different states and different areas, and it'll adjust. Oops, sorry. Let's zoom that back out. It'll adjust the graph on the top. So here's your time series of drought area across the whole of the United States, including Alaska, when you look at this. And what I like about it is, I don't know, let's say you're out in Nebraska. Well, we can just come in here and go to Nebraska. If I can find it, there we go. It'll zoom in on Nebraska, and then show you the time series for the state of Nebraska. So clearly, if I just take this back to here in 2013, like middle of winter 2013, that was one of the very driest time periods on record, so winter 2012-2013. But again, if we put it right here at the end, you can really start to assess the longer-term drought. And why I'm doing this and why I want you to use this is, a lot of folks ask me about analog years. You ask me about things that look very similar to any particular year. And I often find that 2022 seems to be a bit unique, having a difficult time identifying years that match, for example, this ocean temperature pattern like it currently is, and also at the same time the drought extent. And we need to talk about this ocean temperature pattern now, because one of the biggest missteps that maybe I took back in winter in forecasting spring was, as I've told you, I didn't think this La Niña would be this strong right now. Thought I had better evidence that it wouldn't. I should have trusted the National Weather Service and NOAA. They were the only modeling group that suggested that this La Niña had some legs to it and that it was going to last into spring. And it has, and they've done a phenomenal job with this. So here's the big picture thing, all right? Let's just reiterate some of the longer-term concerns we're going to have, because we're going to see some near-term relief in drought in the central United States, but the longer-term issues still stand. And what we're watching is the ocean temperatures here, the ocean temperatures here, and La Niña. Now, to paint a worst-case scenario, if you farm east of the Rocky Mountains, this goes over cold, this maintains cold, and the La Niña stays here. If that is what we see still in about a month from now, so the next 30 to 35 days are going to be critical for us to attempt to predict what summer is going to be. If these areas continue to stay cold, then that pushes the drought risk right into the midsection of the country. And I've shown this to you a lot lately, that's currently of big concern, especially with NOAA's models. Just to reiterate, let's go to the CPC website. Remember, we did this earlier this week. We're going to go to the 3-month outlook. How about June, July, August on precip? We remember that NOAA's forecasts are continuing to keep the greatest risk for summer drought here. Now remember, this is speculative and it's long range and historically not skillful, but it is of concern given the current situation with ocean temperatures. Now, if we see moderation in these ocean temperatures, that drought risk actually shifts toward the Great Basin or possibly through the whole of the West and Pacific Northwest. And the kind of something else to watch out for is La Niña keeping cool here is one thing, but if this starts to moderate, in other words, we see warming up here, well, there were some years where there was massive drought in the midsection of the country where there was cold here, and cold there, cold in the Central Pacific, but a warming signal here. And of course, one of those years would have been 2012. So those are some of the things I'm watching. And we've kind of been keeping up with that narrative for a while. In the near term, this is the thing that just continues to impress me. The Southern Oscillation Index, which again, we remember is a pressure difference between Tahiti in the Pacific and Darwin in Australia. Remember that value of 7 is the critical value we're looking for. It's now pushed all the way up to 20. And it's not that that's unprecedented. In fact, I just went back and reconstructed back to the late 80s what the Southern Oscillation Index value has been. And as high as it is right now, up near 20, it's got me thinking back about what happened in 2010 and 2011. That was a time period in spring where we saw a high Southern Oscillation Index. You can even go back a bit further, like to 2008, just thinking about that time period. And even back here in the very early 2000s, we were up that high at times. But the point about all of this is that this particular La Niña will likely continue to be a background kind of control on the flow of the atmosphere for a while. And what does that mean? That tends to mean strong trade winds. In spring, it means strong jet stream here. In summer, that means the jet stream moves farther to the north. And that shift to the north is what produces the drought risk in the midsection of the country. So that's why we watch that so carefully. Now, the other piece to this is that when we look out over the next few weeks, the MJO signal seems to be wanting to go back somewhere between phases 3, 4, and 5. In fact, take a look at the trade winds during that time. Getting into the first week of May, these trade winds are cranked, and they're meeting westerlies here, which means there's going to be strong rising motion almost sitting on top of phase 4. Now, this I think is a critical part of the near-term forecast. This is what phase 4 gives you. Phase 4 oftentimes produces some sort of ridging over the southeast. And for those of you that are familiar with kind of trough ridge patterns in spring, this would crank from the central plains to New England and really increase the severe weather risk throughout the month of May. This would be a big month of May for severe weather. We're already well above average on tornado reports, wind reports. We're a little below on hail, but this would really kick things off. The issue would be, do the troughs come into the west and keep it wet in the west, especially Northern California to Oregon, Washington? And then how do those troughs come out? Do they eject farther to the north, or do they dig a little bit? But this southeastern ridge, that is telling me that the midsection right in through here could be preparing for a lot of severe weather. Now, distilling all that down, we can look at least at some model forecast. And what we just built up to was this. This is now the May 8th through June 8th precipitation anomaly forecast. And the models are, again, splitting this right, almost on the 95th meridian. So despite some drought relief that will be coming into this area, there will be drought relief here in the near term. The longer range models continue to push that rain shadow out. They continue to have systems eject farther east. So long story short, the drought risk will continue in this part of the plains. We will likely continue to see above average precipitation east of it, which means very tight planting windows. And we already know how far behind things are in this area. But I don't have a reason right now to overturn this. I can't look and say, no, this is changing and therefore this is going to be incorrect. I think this is what it's really looking like. Now, in the near term, we are going to help a big section of the country right in through here. And this has been consistent all week. We even talked about it last Thursday. And what's going on right now is our first system's taking shape. So generally higher pressure over the southeast is feeding in some moisture right up against the dry line, which is right here. And you saw some of the storms popping on that. But the thing about it is there's actually some higher pressure here. And the next system that's coming in is digging a little bit farther to the south. And behind it, look at this. Let's just spin this around. In the North Pacific, we've got 1, 2, 3, possibly 4 more systems just lined up to come into this direction as well. So out ahead of this next system, we have a large area of red flag warnings. We've got high wind watches here, flooding around the Red River of the North. Winter storm warnings back here, and we're still letting some of that cooler air exit east, where we have freeze warnings in parts of Pennsylvania, Iowa, along the Appalachian Mountains, but all the way over to New Jersey. But take a look. Here's the severe weather risk today. And remember, we went back to that satellite imagery at the beginning, and you're already seeing, do you see the storms popping here? We're already watching those storms pop. Now, the severe weather risk today has been focused back here. We're going to have to watch that a little bit later, but all down this line and not ahead of it, we're going to see that happen. Storm Prediction Center tomorrow has increased the area over which it has an enhanced risk. There's some conversation out there, and I do agree with it, that we might see this go over to a moderate risk. But then as we get into the day on Saturday, this all pushes over, centered mostly on Illinois here. So let's go to the high-res NAM model, and let's take a look at what its forecast is showing us. So today we're not going to look at precipitation type. I'm going to focus mostly on radar reflectivity. So this is a simulated radar reflectivity animation. Model did a good job this afternoon initiating some of this early convection, but we're going to keep an eye late tonight right in through here. Now elsewhere, we have rain throughout the mountains. We have rain ahead of this, in this part of Wisconsin, Minnesota. But what we're going to see here is that overnight hours tonight, we're going to watch for a thunderstorm complex to develop here. Scattered storms, Kansas City and surrounding area. And then in the early morning hours, the models are attempting to line this thing out. Now that'll be a tricky thing to do at 9 o'clock in the morning, so we're going to have to watch the radar tomorrow. But that pushes through Nebraska, comes up toward this part of Iowa, and then later in the day, see it again popping here? The concern is out ahead of this, there'll be some supercells that will develop, and behind it, a pretty sizable line of storms comes through. And then as we go into Saturday morning, this whole system's wrapping itself out, as you see here, and pushing east. So that gets us through Saturday. So now you see the severe threat today, tomorrow, and Saturday. And here's the next system coming in. To see it, we got to switch over, though, and do our multi-model analysis. The models are doing pretty well. A lot of coordination between the two in the near term, but longer than that, they kind of split a bit. So we've already seen through Friday into Saturday. Let's let this pick up on Sunday morning. So this is the first system moving on out. Good representation in both models as to where the front will be to the south and where the low will be sitting basically right over the top of Minneapolis-St. Paul. So that system fades as it goes into Ontario, and round number 2 comes in. See it right here. Now look, this is in both models, bringing in rainfall back west over where we would really like to see it. And once again, more precipitation over these dry places in parts of Nebraska and in Kansas. So a good agreement here. And by the way, the next system's coming into the Pacific Northwest. Told you they were lined up here. Well, that system pushes east on Tuesday. Good agreement in the models on how it spreads through the Great Lakes states, drags a front all the way down through the lower Mississippi River Valley, and that system heads toward New England. The models separate a bit on the timing of the next system. This would be next Thursday. The European, as normal, slower. The GFS, more progressive. And you do see some snow on the northern side of this. I'm going to be honest with you. These models in April are not predicting snow very well. So let's not talk about it as something that's going to be a certainty. But that system, there is that third system moving through there. This would be next Wednesday, Thursday. And then that one kind of keeps moving on out, and there's more behind it. You can see the next systems coming behind it. I think the best way to think about all of this is to show you these two maps. Through the next 10 days, this first map is from the European Ensemble, 12Z run today on Thursday, and it shows that there's a better than 90% chance everywhere in this deepest shade of red of getting at least an inch of precip. This is the likelihood of getting at least 2 inches. And you can see it centered right there in Kansas City, back toward Lincoln and Omaha, and then right here to central Nebraska, where it's been so very dry. And here's the probability, just to look at it, when we get out there, let's click on it again. There it is, that's 4 inches. So we're looking at very wet conditions. The main issue here is this is great drought relief in this area, but this is going to continue to close off our planting windows, and we're just going to push this farther into the month of May before we really make progress across this section of the country with planting. What I'm getting concerned about is, watch this, May 8th, 9th, 10th. We dig a trough in here, and this is good model agreement here. By the 10th and 11th, that trough's coming right over the Great Basin. This is going to set up for a major warm-up in here, opening up a broad sector of unstable air, and that trough's going to come through and sweep it out, which means going forward from now all the way through May, I'm very concerned about the risk of severe weather, of this being a very active severe weather season. And by the way, I should have mentioned this more clearly. Even this weekend, we just come back to Sunday, Monday. We're going to watch here on Sunday, here on Monday for the risk of severe storms again. So this is we got basically a 4-day threat coming up here in the near term. And then, as I just stated, going out there fully into week 2, that whole area is going to continue to see the risk of strong to severe storms and very tight windows. So that continues to be our major problem as we go forward. Let's talk about temperatures. I tried making this map for you today, but I apologize. I'm using 30,000 cities in the United States and then trying to interpolate around them. And what you've got here is the number or the percent of the last 40 years where we've had a frost that occurred after today. So this shading down here means at one time in the last 40 years we've had a frost after today. So, it's part of Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky here, southern Illinois. Most regions in through here, the likelihood of a late frost is very low. It's under 20%. Of course, it's high the farther north you go. Hopefully this map is intuitive. As we look out over the next 7 days, this is what I've got for frost. Everything that you see here in gray, according to the National Digital Forecast Database, will see a frost. And a lot of this is happening tomorrow morning, on Friday morning. All right. Now, we're going to get more into a discussion on these temperatures in a second here, but I want to show you at least the high temperatures. We've already seen these today. Friday, very hot in the plains, but still much cooler than average from the northwest all the way to New England, including a big section of the Midwest. Going into the weekend, there's Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So we keep seeing cold air in this region. In fact, it will likely be there going out to the end of April and the beginning of May. First week of May, we'll continue to see that. That's just one of the reasons why at the beginning of this I addressed that issue in the Northern Plains since I got asked about it. Now, as we get out there day 10 through 15, which this now takes us out there into the second week of May, we do see some cooler air that's in place here. But a lot of this is driven by cloud cover and precipitation, not big Arctic high pressure systems. And so the lack of big Arctic high pressure systems where we get clear, calm nights is what tells me that I think right now our risk of frost is diminishing quite a bit in through here, even though in the last few years we've had that May frost to the eastern Corn Belt. So I want to show it to you one last way before we talk about South America and wrap this up. The color shading on this map, which you can see the probabilities over here, tells you the chance of having a minimum temperature over the next 15 days below freezing. So here's today going into tomorrow. This is Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So clearly warming things up. By next Wednesday into next Thursday and Friday, what I'll be watching for is May 7th, which is here, May 8th, and maybe into May 9th. You see from the 7th, there it is, and 8th, I know the probabilities are low, but we could get some overnight temperatures that do creep down into the mid to upper 30s in this area. So we're not fully just breaking away into spring warmth just yet. So I just thought I would kind of bring that to your attention. All right. Don't think there's going to be a frost, but I did need to at least show you the probability. All right. In the last few seconds here, South America. We've been discussing how over the last month there has been dryness here. It's hit Goiás pretty hard, parts of Mato Grosso, especially over here in western Mato Grosso. And that's where we grow a lot of this Safrinha crop. Okay, sorry about that. I think about all of it and know that we're in May very soon, and May is the end of the monsoon. So to see drier than normal conditions, that means a lot of this crop is finishing under drier conditions and has been. It's been through pollination and grain fill on the Safrinha corn. And I think that this is, what I guess I'd like to say is I wouldn't be surprised if we hear, when we do get our next reports in May, that the crop was overestimated in its size given how dry the finish was for it. So we'll wait for that, but at least from a meteorological perspective, that's what I'm seeing. Really appreciate your attention. I will talk to you again on Monday. Thanks.